Welcome, TEI family, to another episode of The Everyday Investor. Today we have a very special guest with us. This gentleman is what I call a subject matter expert in human resources, also known as HR. He has invested in himself over the years, despite facing adversity, and has come out sharper and a better businessman as a result of it. Please help me welcome Scott Hanis. How's it going, Scott?
Good. How you doing, David?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for kind of giving me some time here this morning. I know we were talking a little bit offline, and the point of this kind of podcast and kind of what I'm trying to do is again invest in skills, money, and assets. I'm trying to get the audience to understand to invest in themselves, to earn one or more skills to increase their earning potential, and then use that increased earning potential to get involved in assets or purchase assets such as real estate, such as stocks or bonds, and or even like you have, start your own business. I'm excited today just because a lot of times, when I talk to a subject matter expert, they may work for another company as opposed to having their own thing going on. So you kind of hit two pieces of the puzzle in terms of being a subject matter expert in human resources, but also have your own business, so you can talk, about your experience with being a subject matter expert while also owning your business. And again, I'm excited because you're the real deal. Formerly a vice president of, a nice size company to the point where you had, 1,200 or around 1,200 employees who reported to you in some form or fashion. And you have, currently own your own company, 42 HR solutions. So again, I want to talk about all that. But again, I like to start at the beginning. Growing up, being from Cleveland, how was life growing up? Did you come from a wealthy family? Did you come from a lower class, middle class family? How was life growing up in Cleveland for you?
Yeah. So first of all, David, super excited to talk with you. Glad we got to reconnect.
Absolutely.
So super stoked to be here. And so I'm going to try to add as much value as I can today. So thanks so much for having me on.
No problem.
So I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I would not say we were like poor, but we were probably lower, like on the wealth status. My mom and dad, I'm very fortunate to have mom and dad, but my dad lost his job 3 different times growing up. So finances were always like tough for the family, and bankruptcies, thoughts were always had. So part of my story is, when my dad lost his job for the 3rd time, I was 13 years old. I remember my parents talking about, hey, we may lose the house, like we can't pay bills. And I'm like, all right, what can I do? And so I remember
13.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've always been probably way more mature for my age than I should be. My parents did an amazing job raising me, always loved and supported me. And so I wanted to do something to help them. And so this is where some darkness talks about, like with adversity, right? Because we talked about before the ups and downs. And being 13, I got a job at a sports card shop, and I love sports, and not as gifted athletically as David is here, but I love sports, and got an opportunity to work as like a part-time salesperson at a sports card shop. And unfortunately, the person I worked for decided that he was going to abuse me mentally as well as sexually.
Wow.
And so when I was 13 or 14, I got to go through that as kind of like a big hurdle in my life. But it's made me the person I am today, right?
Yeah.
Like I can sit there and be angry, and I'm not saying I wasn't angry or
Right.
a lot of hurt, but at the end of the day, like it made me much more compassionate, empathetic. Like we talked about before that we got started here today. Like we don't know what other people are going through.
Absolutely.
You only see like what we see on the outside. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something to share. And I think at the end of the day, like you can't give what you don't have. So I love the what you're doing with the podcast and, getting people on to kind of share. And hopefully, again, if this resonates with one person, like God's using me to help one person, right?
Yep.
And it can be his vessel. So that's super important to me. But yeah, so it didn't grow up with, a lot of money. Again, grew up with loving parents that supported me, great family. I have an amazing sister too. And so we all were very close. Like we're still close to this day.
Yep.
And we've gotten through, that. We got through, my mom had cancer. She had 2 strokes. They gave her like a 10% chance to live. And so overcoming some of those things. And my mom, big role model for me. And so was my dad, just growing up. And again, just super blessed and thankful to have them in my life, but didn't know like what making money was all about when I got started. Like nobody gave me anything. Like I've worked really hard in my life. I didn't have the proverbial like silver spoon. Although I'm very cognizant that I grew up maybe in better situation than some other people did,
Yep.
right? So I know like it always could be worse.
Right.
And so, but I took advantage of the opportunities that, were placed in my life, and I worked hard. I would work 30 to 40 hours a week from when I was 13 all the way till I was, 17. And I got an opportunity to play baseball in high school. And so I couldn't work as much.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, like I've always had like a go-giver kind of mentality. I want to help people. That's why I'm in human resources,
Yeah,
right? Like
for
if you
sure.
don't love people, don't be in this field, right?
Yep.
Wrong field for you. You got to love people. Hopefully you want to make a difference. You want to make an impact. You want to help people. And that's kind of why I'm where I'm at today.
No, that's interesting. So, do you think, because for me personally, I have overcome some challenges growing up, just as a result of life. So I lost my father when I was 5 years old. He was just an older gentleman. He was like 69 and was born in 1929. So just kind of working in those tough conditions of like manufacturing plants growing up, I think just eventually took its toll on him. Think about OSHA requirements, and they weren't as stringent as they are now. Back in the 30s or the 40s, so they were working in tougher conditions. But again, losing my father growing up, losing my brother in college, losing my best friend shortly after college, that kind of has given me a different perspective on life. It kind of toughened me up, a lot more callous. It seems like going through a lot of things in life, or growing up between having to work 30 to 40 hours, early on, and they're losing his job multiple times, and mine being diagnosed with cancer. Do you think that at an early age that gave you a different perspective on life compared to maybe another 13-year-old who maybe was sheltered or didn't have those type of challenges to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you hear like mindset about like gratitude and
Yep.
just being thankful,
Yep.
like just having a nice meal. Like I remember like that was just that was a nice thing for us. Or when I was 13, believe it or not, I still believed in Santa Claus, right? Because my dad lost his job.
13.
Yeah, my dad lost his job for the third time, and I remember I wanted a CD player, right? Like CDs just came out, and I'm showing how old I am, David. And I went ahead and I asked Santa for a CD player. And so I got a CD player, and I'm like, there's no way my parents can afford it. Right?
Yeah.
And so I remember I got a Bobby Brown CD, and I can't remember the other CD I got, but like I was like the happiest kid. I'm like, Santa's still real, right?
Yeah.
And so like it made me appreciate the little things I think in life way more. Between that and then one of my best friends, his brother committed suicide when he was 16.
Yep.
And just like going through that and like through the abuse that I suffered when I was 13 or 14, the sexual abuse and the mental abuse, I had a lot of like depression and just like suicidal thoughts, and like seeing my best friend's brother commit suicide. I'm like, there's no way I could do that to my family. Right. So like that gave me another perspective. And so I think, I'm a very faith-filled person, like I feel like I'm here for a reason. God gave me a purpose. And I think like all these different things that happen in your life, like if I can learn something and then apply it and then give back to other people, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in life. Like you don't have to ask me what my why or my purpose is. I know what it is. Right. And so I'm very thankful that some of the things that happen in my life, probably similar to things that have happened in your life, it makes you who you are. Right.
Absolutely.
And not that it defines us negatively, but I think it makes us who we are, and it allows us to be more empathetic, which is a huge emotional intelligence aspect that I use in human resources and helping people. But I can relate to anybody, and you could be the janitor of a company or you could be the CEO. I'm going to find something that I can work with you on because you're a human being, right? It's not just a person or you're a number or
title.
Yeah, it's exactly. Like none of that stuff's ever mattered for me in my career. And I think I've been successful because of that. I've had a different approach. It's not about like the backstabbing that goes on in the corporate world. And I'm sure you see some of that, or like, I need to be at this rank or this title. Like, I don't care about that. It's what can I do to make an impact each day? And that's where, again, I think all these things that happen in my life or in your life or anybody's lives that have gone through adversity or suffering, it gets us to this point where we have two choices. We can either be really upset and stay in a dark place. I'm not saying I haven't been in a dark place.
Yeah, for sure.
Or we could choose to make different decisions and rise above it, right? And again, I'm not saying it happens overnight. I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, I've talked to a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, when I was younger, growing up to get me to where I'm at today, right? And all those things like develop you as a person.
So what do you think, and this is curious now for me, so what do you think separates those people who unfortunately, because I mean, I had man, this was in law school, as you have me thinking back now, we just graduated law school, and I had a buddy who from South Carolina, just a good brother, a real good brother. Hey, I'm an attorney, but I kind of fell into this. I wasn't one of those guys who always wanted to be an attorney growing up, and he was more so one of those guys. And he just unfortunately got into a situation with the law after after law school, as he was practicing as an attorney for like within government. And obviously, if you get into the law, I mean, if you get into trouble with the law, you know, as a government, worker, especially as an attorney, then you maybe understand what's coming down the pipeline, even though it may be a difficult time or maybe a dark time at that point in time. For me, as I was looking at the situation, it was like, man, that's not the end of your life. You're like maybe mid-20s at this point. You can't think that that's the end of your life. But unfortunately, he took his life as a result of that experience, or just kind of going through that situation. So I guess with that being said, what do you think like separates people who if you look at those dark times or those negative situations that happen in life, and they're going to come at some point. So what is the difference between a person who like, overcomes it or looks at it differently and want to learn from it and get better from it, and in some way get out of it and kind of look back and use it as a story to motivate others, as opposed to someone who looks at it and just is very in a dark space as a result of it, or maybe in a worst case scenario take their life as a result of it. So what do you think is the differentiating factor between someone who looks at it and overcomes it as opposed to someone who doesn't?
That's a great question. I think there's probably multiple things. I don't think it's just one thing. I think, first of all, I think it's like, your faith, right? Like,
Okay.
I think having a strong faith, and I haven't always had a strong faith life. I actually left my church for a number of years, and my faith I didn't practice when I was going through the dark times, because I'm like, all right, like, how can I want to take my life and still believe that there's a God, right? Or that Jesus was there. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect by any means. No, I don't want to be preachy or anything like that. But when I say, I think like having a good foundation in what you believe in your faith, whatever it is that you believe. And then I think making good decisions. I always tell my son, I have a 16-year-old son, or will be 16 on March 20th. My wife and I do. And like, I'm like, you get to make, one life, right? You have one life. And so what decisions do you make? Because, I always tell my son he's made for greatness, right? God put us all on earth to be great. And so we have choices that we get to make. So what choices are you going to make? Do you want that instant gratification, or do you want to work hard for what you want to have in life? And so like being able to share that with him. And I think having that mindset has always been something for me. And then I think like knowing that this is a temporary low point, and then how can I overcome? So I think having a good support system, and that's where I've been very fortunate. If I didn't have my parents or some of my friends or my teachers or my family members, I probably wouldn't be here today. Right. So I think, understanding that, not everybody gets to that point, right? Like, I mean, this is where, again, like we said at the beginning, David, we don't know what other people are going through.
Right. Yep.
You might run into somebody at the grocery store, at the gym, or at church that's really struggling.
Yep.
You could have like one kind thing. You could be the light. Like this is where I say, like, make a difference, make an impact.
Yep.
Just being kind and nice to people, you might lift somebody's spirits up, and they might be really dark, and they might be thinking about doing something that they shouldn't do, right?
Yep.
And again, we all make mistakes. We're all guilty of it. We all do things that we shouldn't do. Yep. But then it's in the response of that messiness and that darkness. How do we like rise above that? How do we overcome those things? And like, that's something I'm a big believer. That's why Fortitude is in my business name.
Yep.
It's all about, being courageous through adversity, right?
Yep.
Courage through adversity. Life's not easy. Life stinks at times, right?
Oh.
Like, it's like, I'm thinking about Rocky Balboa, like when he's fighting, he's getting knocked out, and he has got that famous line in Rocky Balboa, the movie, where he talks about like, life is not always sunshine and rainbows, right? But it's about, what can we do to pick ourselves up? So like for me personally, and I don't know if you were going to go here with this, but like I listen to a lot of motivational speakers.
Okay.
I love Dr. Thomas. I love Inky Johnson. I'll listen to Tony Robbins,
Gotcha.
Jim Rohn. So like that helps form my mindset. I write down what I'm thankful for. I think about what I'm thankful for. I pray about, thank you, God, for the gift of life today. Like each day is a gift. Yep. What I choose to do with that day is my choice. But the fact that I'm alive today is all thanks to God, right?
Okay.
And, so that's part of like my mindset and like just where I'm at. But again, like I could see like when I was in really dark places and I was suffering, like I didn't want to get out of bed, or like, like gun in my mouth kind of thing. Like, wow, this is it. Like I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like I think like having those positive influences, being around like, so I think your circle and who you interact with and
Or
talk with. I mean, like, and just talking with you, David, we haven't talked probably since 2020
yeah,
in person. And I just love catching up, and I can see all the positivity and the things
mm,
that you're doing to
yeah,
help other people. And like, we need more people that want to do that. Right. And I don't want to, it's not about me. It's about we, and it's about everybody else. And
yeah,
what can I do to help? If I help one person a day, I know I'm doing what God wants me to do. Like that's part of my mission internally. That's part of my why. That's what drives me. You know, again, like being in the business that I'm in, like we do business and HR consulting and we do recruiting. And if I can help one business owner, like help one of their team members or their employees have a better day at work, or maybe they're having a tough situation, I feel good about it. You know,
yeah,
it's not like it's a mundane job for me.
right,
Or if I can hire one key team member to help their, that person, like I believe anybody that's got employees or team members, when you hire that person, you're not just hiring them, you hire their entire family, right? And
yeah,
so like that's a big responsibility. Like the last thing I want to do is hire someone and then have to worry about letting them go, right?
yeah,
And
that's true.
if I don't lead them and I don't provide them with tools and resources, clear communication, expectations, goals, talk about where I want to take the company and get them involved in that, then I'm failing them as their leader,
Right.
right? And so I think too many people, like in today's society, David, we want to talk about like being business leaders. We need to talk about being human leaders. Like,
Illness, yeah, I like that. I
and
like
again,
that.
and we struggle, I think, as humans and as people today, like we don't have the soft skills or the human skills, right? And there's a big psychology thing about being positive, I think, in the workplace. I was again at the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp Safety Congress, and this lady Ruth gave a presentation about positive psychology, and like the little things that we don't think about, they make a big difference to
Right.
people. You know, like, and I remember being in the corporate office with the 1,200 employees for the private equity firm. My door was always open. I didn't care if you were the janitor or you were the CEO. You want to come in and talk to me? I got two big ears and they stick out for a reason. But like, come in and talk, even if it's 5, 10 minutes out of your day. The problem with that was always, David, is I would give everything to everybody else, and then I wouldn't take care of myself.
Got you.
And
Got
I
you.
know we talked about that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, yeah. So I want to kind of take this timeline approach. So I guess, did you always know, again, kind of continuing on the path of growing up and kind of going through the difficult situations? Did you always know? Like I said, because for me it was okay. I'm gonna play sports and I'm gonna figure all this other stuff out later.
Mm.
Uh, that was my thing, is like to get to the NFL, and obviously things changed once I got to college, and got some mentors, some good mentors who were able to pour into me, and then just understanding when I got to college, like, okay, I'm good, but man, it's another level of athlete that's going to make it to the NFL, and I maybe don't fit that mold. So I guess growing up, did you always want to be in HR, or did that just kind of
No.
stumble on you later on in life? Because I know, again, going to a community college and then graduating, I think what a business management degree.
Yeah.
And again, the good thing about HR is you don't necessarily have to go into HR to be work within the field of HR, but it's a number of things that you can go into and still get into HR. So I guess, how did HR come about?
Yeah, I mean, so I love people. I always wanted to be in business, right? I don't know if it was because my dad worked in business, even though he got laid off 3 times, shouldn't have. Or if it was just like seeing people that like I thought were successful, they
Right.
worked in business, right? So I'm like, I want to go in business. And I've always had like an entrepreneurial probably mindset
Okay.
because like I was a part owner of a sports card shop when I was 15.
Okay. So that entrepreneurial spirit was always in you.
I think it's always been in
Yeah.
me, and that and being around people and helping lead people. The human resources part didn't come into play. When I graduated from Bowdoin Wallace, I ended up working at a bank and being like in a management training program.
Okay.
Then my mom got diagnosed with the cancer, and
Okay.
so I ended up quitting my job to stay home and kind of take care of her. She had a bunch of rehab and chemo. And then I'm like, all right, I went back to another bank after my mom was in a good place. And I'm like,
So,
this
I,
is,
so I'm sorry. So what did your? Because I know you said you had a dad growing up who lost his job three
yeah.
times. So I guess, where was he during, like, your mom kind of?
Yeah, so my dad was working full time, and
Okay.
because of all the stuff, like, my
Okay.
sister was in school
Okay.
for dental hygiene, so
Gotcha.
like she was stressed, she couldn't do it. I just graduated college. It was 2001. I'm like, all right, mom, like I'm gonna quit my job, right?
Gotcha. Okay. No, yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that
Yeah,
together, because I know you said you, uh, was helping her out, and I
yep,
was just kind of just seeing what your dad was doing around this time. So he was kind of still working, bringing home the
yep.
bacon, and
Still
kind of.
bringing in money to pay bills. My mom
Gotcha.
was sick. And then, after I found out like I don't want to work for a bank, I ended up getting into sales. And so I was working in sales. I loved some of the aspect of sales. I still don't like some aspects of sales, but so I got into that. And then when the company I was working for, they laid me off because they sold the company. At that point, I had like a 3-month period to figure out what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And during that time is where I met my wife, and like I started volunteering, going back to church. And then I got into a company where it was a smaller family-owned business with about 300 employees. They didn't have anybody dedicated to human resources. They had like 3 different people like trying to figure out who's doing what in HR, and just wasn't very effective. And I was originally hired to do like project coordination management and like quality management because they worked in automotive, right? So like with Ford and General Motors, you had to have like be ISO certified, ISO 9001 certified. So I helped with that. And then like the owners, I knew one of the owners. I worked with his wife at the company I was just laid off from. And then the other owner, him and I went to school together at Baldwin Wallace. So
Nice.
kind of had it in, again, like your network's super important. If you don't already know that, know your network. Don't ever lead people in a bad, way, because that could negatively impact you. And then, so when I was there, Bob and Chuck, the 2 owners, were like, Scott, like we need somebody that's dedicated to HR. We can't have 3 people doing this. So I just kind of got thrown into the fire with HR. I took some HR classes when I was in college, but didn't know that was going to be my calling. But I love people and I want to make a difference. So like, and everybody's got like this bad rap about HR. They think HR, human resources, is like Toby from The Office.
Yeah.
Boring stuff, and like things are black and white. Things are gray sometimes, right?
Sure.
And understanding and being there for your employees or your team members and also the company, like that's a fine line, right? And being able to make sure that we treat people the right way and that we compensate people fairly. And I mean, there's been times throughout my career where like I'm fighting for the employee or the team member versus the company. But that's a good person that does HR. They have that balance. So that's when I got into HR. This would have been back in 2005 in March.
So I guess, and this is mind blowing. So at that point in time, you said it was 3 people. With those 3 people, was anyone like dedicated to HR? You said no, or was it just like they were kind of doing stuff? Because that sounds crazy. I know 300 people. No, that doesn't sound like a big company, but to have 300 employees and no one, and essentially no HR department, just sounds crazy.
So they did it. And again, this is a great organization, so I'm not saying anything negative.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Well, I think
they just didn't have the structure because they didn't, like, again, this happens even today in the workplace. Like HR is not always valued. I think as like a business function in an organization, I think it's becoming more valued, especially with everything we just went through the last couple of years with the pandemic and then, COVID and all this stuff. And now there's a lot of people have mental issues and they're trying to come back into the workplace or, they're trying to figure out the remote side. So I think it's more valued now, but this company it wasn't at high importance. And then when I got there, they saw that like the 3 people, they were playing like, I call it the mom-dad syndrome, right? They don't like what person A says, so they go to person B. And they don't like what person B says, so they go to person C.
Gotcha.
So like there's no consistency. There wasn't a lot of good communication. So, I mean, I remember when I left that company, I was there for 5.5 years. I mean, and this is a smaller organization. I mean, but like people, I mean, a nice going away party and like gift cards. And I mean, like people cared about the work that I did. So it validated all the stuff that I did to try to help the team and the employees and the company out. Right. Like, so that to me has always been like, that's the good job, Scott kind of thing. Not that I need that, but when I left, I knew I made a difference there. Right.
Okay. And that's interesting. And I guess I have to ask you this question just based on you having been at bigger companies as well as smaller companies. It seems like in those 5 years, especially kind of being a person that headed up that HR department, I'm pretty sure you learned a lot. So I guess, do you think, would you prefer having a situation where you're essentially heading up an HR department and now you effectively get the chance to learn so much and that may can fast track your growth, as opposed to being maybe in a larger organization where it's maybe a lot of structure, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you're more of a number as opposed to somebody who can like really kind of be on a fast track to success, or at least into, getting a lot of knowledge just based off of, having to do everything at the beginning. Which one would you maybe prefer, maybe for yourself or just for the person who maybe wants to go into HR to try to kind of get the most out of it early on?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, with my personality, David, I want to be like thrown to the fire. I want to be able to build and learn. I mean, and like there was no constraints on me. If I wanted to go to a seminar, I could go to a seminar. If I wanted to work with our, our employment attorney firm that we worked with, they put on like these monthly seminars. I would go to that. I joined SHRM, which is Society for Human Resource Management. If you're looking to get into it, great, thing. I had a couple mentors
Right.
throughout the time that I started. So one of the guys that I grew up with, he was a priest in the Catholic faith, left the priesthood, but he became an HR executive after he left the priesthood. So he was someone that helped mentor me.
Okay.
And so like I like that approach because I'm a very driven individual.
Yep.
Like again, like kind of what we talked about before we started this. Like I set goals and like I'll go and I'll work my butt off till I crush it. But then when I don't have a goal, then I fall into the trap where I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna work as hard. But I'd rather like
No,
uh,
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say I want to like actually learn every aspect of HR. Like people think HR is just hiring and firing or benefits or like employee relations.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much more to it. You could talk about succession planning and identifying high potentials, setting like goals and objectives to help the company grow. Like that's what we do now. Like I want to take a company that's making $5 million and how do I get you to $20 million?
Yeah.
What people, process, systems, what do we need to put in place that you don't currently have? How are you treating your employees? What's your pulse of the organization? Do the employees want to show up to work or do they hate coming to work? Like understanding all those things and the dynamic that happens around your culture and your brand, and like your values. Do you live them out or are they just lip service? Like those are things that I get really passionate about. I think if you work in a larger setting, David, you get to learn little pieces of it.
Yeah.
So, like maybe it's good to do that for some people that want to get into HR because you can start out and do recruiting and learn that aspect and then get in other things. But I don't want anybody to like put like handcuffs on me and tell me I only can do that.
Yeah.
Like I want to learn everything, but that's just who I am. I'm a very inquisitive person. I'm very driven. If you want to get in HR and you're not in HR, like first of all, read all the articles, go to YouTube, like again, like type in things about like leadership, like again, making a difference like with the HR function in a business,
Yep.
but then join professional communities like Society for Human Resource
I
Management.
like that.
You could also jump on LinkedIn, join different, groups and forums and talk, ask questions, find a mentor, that can help you on your journey. You don't need to go it alone. Like life's hard enough. Don't go it alone. Bring somebody along with you. That's
Yep.
been there and done that. Sorry, David.
No, I know, and I like that. And I guess no, what would you say? Because like you said, HR is so much more than, at least from what my understanding, what it was, up until maybe a few years ago, where you thought if you worked in HR, then you deal with, like you said, hiring and firing, and the person who kind of deals with this 401k stuff and pensions or whatever, and all that stuff. But it's so much more to it, to the point where I think the HR can literally make or break a company in a lot of aspects, based on the people that's in there and like who's running the HR department. It's almost like the lifeblood of a company, I would say. What do you think? What would you say are maybe some biggest myths about like HR and like human resources that people maybe just don't understand, or they misunderstand?
Yeah. So I mean, like when you look at the autonomy or the anatomy of like an organization, right? So like you have different business function segments. Like you have your finance and your accounting, you have your sales, you have your marketing, quality, your production, whatever it is. And then like HR is typically on the side. So I think like the fact that HR sits in their office and they don't do anything, like that's a bad myth, right?
Right.
And there are a lot of companies where unfortunately that's the HR myth,
Right. Yeah.
or it's known as personnel, right? So like HR only processes paperwork and they only do like admin type tasks. So those are the two big myths. And then I think the third one that you said, like we just do hiring and firing, and that HR doesn't support the team. They only care about the company, and like they're the big bad entity within an organization. And again, like that's because unfortunately there's a lot of bad people that work in HR, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you an example. So I worked at this company after I left the private owned business that was, a small business with 300 employees. I went to work for a larger organization as a regional HR manager. And the person that was in there before me, they actually closed the door. It was locked. If you wanted to come into HR, you had to be buzzed in, right?
Really?
And they wouldn't walk the manufacturing floor. They wouldn't talk to the employees or team members unless they were part of this little like group of people.
Yeah.
So it was very standoffish. So one of the things I did when I first got there, we got rid of the buzzer. My door was always open.
Yep.
Walk the shop floor unless, I was the only one in the office, and I would lock the door behind me because there's personnel confidential files.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'd walk the shop floor. I'd say hello to everybody in the morning. Thank you at the end of the day. Like just treating them like a human being, right? Like just because you work for a company, like if your organization is not saying please and thank you and showing appreciation and showing respect, you need to look, do I want to work in this environment? You know what I mean? And so like understanding the culture and like, again, what does the HR function do strategically to help bring in talent or to retain talent or to like help an employee. Like some of the most joyous moments I've had in HR, David, is, working with an employee that maybe just got a bad diagnosis of like cancer, right?
Okay.
And then how do they utilize their benefits to make sure they're getting the best treatment and coverage, options that are possible, and giving them support system with like an employee assistance program, because we know that they're going to go through ups and downs with their treatment, like really truly helping somebody, or taking an individual, that worked as like a machine operator and seeing them grow and progress, he, she, or they, into a leadership position, and developing that person from like an organizational development or a talent development standpoint. Like that's what HR function should be. It shouldn't be the myth of we only hire and fire. We only care about the company. We don't care about our employees, and we're going to lock the door. Like to me, that's the wrong approach. And what you just said, David, like now, like as organizations come out of this pandemic, they're actually promoting people from HR into more strategic roles within the organization. You're seeing people that were heads of HR departments that are now being considered for CEO roles, right?
Nice.
You can have your subject matter expert in finance as the CFO or the controller or the director of finance, but that unfortunately they may not know how to deal with people.
Right.
You can deal with people and lead people and motivate people. And again, it's a lonely role. Like in HR, typically, David, what everybody makes. It's typically you're processing payroll. And you're like, well, she's making this and I'm only making this, right? It messes with your mind.
Yeah, I bet.
So like you got to be mature enough and you got to be able to keep your mouth shut, right?
Gotcha.
There's a lot of HR people that I've been very fortunate. I haven't worked with bad HR people. I've worked with a lot of great HR people, but I think some of that comes with the culture and the leadership that you develop. But they'll tell people, oh yeah, this person makes this. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Really?
Oh yeah, it's not good. I've got horror stories I won't share, but
and so this is interesting because I think you brought up a lot of great points. And like you said, HR, they're responsible for, among many tasks, hiring people. And at this point in my life, and no matter what a company is paying me, if it's a bad work environment, I'm just not going to work there. I would never work. I mean, we get one life, and life is, as we talked about earlier, tough enough with just unforeseen things coming and family issues and things like that we have to get through. But to go to somewhere where you're going to spend most of your time at work, to go there day in and day out and have to be in this negative, maybe toxic work culture, it's just not worth any amount of money. So I mean, I think HR's function within a company is very important, and I can see the way they affect the bottom line between bringing in, good talent, but then being able to retain that good talent and that having an effect on the bottom line from going from a $5 million company to a $20 million company. I guess I would like to ask you this because, again, you talked about, getting your start at a smaller company, 300 employees, and you eventually work your way up to the vice president of a private equity firm. Maybe how did that come about? And then, I guess, can you talk a little bit about like the importance of that, like getting in that particular position in your life?
Yeah. So to me, again, it goes back to like, again, life being a journey, right? Like, and again, nobody gave me the silver spoon where I could go, and I know I've had it better than other people have, but like working hard, understanding, I wanted to be the best at HR, right? I have a buddy that's in HR. His name's Chris, and Chris is like, Scotty goes like, you're like the doctor of HR. Like you're like Superman. I'm like, all right, like that's great. And that's a great compliment. And I don't take compliments very well personally because of all my struggle growing up. But with that, like I wanted to learn everything about the human resources function. So becoming that subject matter expert and then using my personality and my God-given talents and my strengths, then that's allowed me to have a lot of success in my career. And because I think I'm pretty strong when it comes to emotional intelligence, which gets into like self-awareness and self-regulation and empathy and motivation and like social skills, I'm pretty blessed with those skill sets. That's allowed me a lot of success. Being in, good relationships with mentors. Like I have another mentor, his name's Larry, and he was an executive for Pepsi, and so he managed 250 people all across the world. And like, I learned a ton from him. And then, reading books and again, shifting the mindset because I had goals. Like I wanted to be a vice president of HR before I turned 40. I was able to do that again,
Nice.
very thankfully. But again, like I also heard a lot of no's. Like I remember I interviewed for the Cleveland Cavaliers and like Dan Gilbert's company
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Quicken Loans, and there was 200 people, and I came in third out of 200 for the
Really?
HR role. And like that was a tough blow for me, right? Because I mean, this is like when LeBron came back to Cleveland,
Nice. Yeah.
2016. I would have gotten a ring because you were a member of the
Yep.
Cavaliers team. So I mean, that would have been really cool. But like I've had a lot of no's in order to get to the yeses,
Yep.
right? So I didn't let those things kind of like negatively impact me. Like again, there's days I was like, what the heck? Like, what do you want from me, God? Like,
Right.
where do you want me to go? But then I think all those no's, like there was always a purpose, right? And God hasn't let me down. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
So because of that, like I just continue to persevere, be resilient, work hard, ask questions, use my big ears and try to listen and really kind of, define what other people's success was going to be on my team. So that was one of the things, like I mentioned, when I left in the smaller company with 300 employees, and like the employees showed a lot of gratitude towards me when I left. And I still talk to some of those employees, to this day. Or when I went to work for larger organizations, I've always felt good about when I left. I left the organization in a better place than
For
when I
sure.
got there, right?
Yep.
I built relationships. I've looked at, I didn't want the organization to be in a pinch. So, okay, if I leave, like when I worked for the company that did a lot of mergers and acquisition, this was an international company. We
Yep.
made automotive component parts. This was Amtech Tech 4, Newmeyer Tech 4. But when I left, like my director of HR was able to take over my position. The HR manager was able to take my director of HR role. So I always tried to make sure I had good succession planning built, and that the company, if they needed anything, they could always call me.
Yep.
Again, I still talk to employees from all the companies I've worked for or worked with. And again, for me, it's about like they don't work for me, they work with me, right? And so to me, I think that's a big shift in mindset. And again, the leadership, I've been very fortunate where like the success has not gotten to my head, right? Like you're never going to see me probably, drive like a Lamborghini or anything like that. I'm just more grounded in that.
Right.
I'd rather, I've been able to receive so much. I want to give back, right?
Gotcha.
So,
No, yeah, and so in terms of being like the vice president of like HR at a company, like what are some of those like roles and responsibilities that you had to kind of carry out compared to maybe just being a HR manager or director of HR? And yeah, so what's the difference when you're talking about being like the vice president of HR for a company, particularly a private equity firm?
yeah. So with the PE firm, like we had a lot of goals and targets that were centered around like the P&L, the profit and loss statement of the business. So like one of my goals was I had to save $500,000 on health insurance because we spent like $5 million at the one organization I worked at. So understanding that, so there was a lot more tie-in, I think, on the executive level role
Gotcha.
with the P&L and the business plan and the strategy.
Yep.
A lot of times, like when I was an HR manager for the 300 employees when I first got into HR, it was more about kind of like just the day-to-day stuff.
Yep.
And then as you grew, or as I've grown in my career, David, it's been more about the strategic. And I mean, I still do tactical stuff because I do like the tactical side, but it's more about like the planning and like who do we need to add on the team in order to help us get to the next, $10 million of revenue or success. So understanding that, but then also, as I've grown in my career, it's been more about building high performing teams and working with them and building them up and making sure that our talent, acquisition strategy met kind of the needs of the business, and then kind of forward thinking and looking proactively, hey, if we buy this company or if we do this, what do we need to support that? And if we do that, what does that change management look like? So a little bit more strategic focused versus like dealing with, Billy or Johnny or Susie or Sally that need the help on the day-to-day type
sure.
thing because their paycheck wasn't correct. That's a super important thing.
Yeah, but it's
For my team members to take care of that. Like I look at things like as I progressed in my career, David, it was, what's a $10 item? What's a $100 item, $1,000 or a $10,000 item? And the private equity firm, quite frankly, was paying me to spend my time on the $1,000 and the $10,000 tasks, not the $10 and $100 tasks.
gotcha.
Now, I never let that get to my head because if somebody needed help with something, I was still going to go do the $10 task.
Right.
I mean, I actually, horrible story, but when I first started working with one of these companies, David, I think I was 2 months into the job, horrible culture. Like when I was hired, my boss and I were told by the company out of Germany, you either turn it or you close it, right? and people actually like in the facility in the men's restroom and the like where the locker room was where the manufacturing employees would change and use the facilities. Somebody actually took fecal matter and wiped it all over the urinal and all
Really?
the stalls. And rather than sit there and call maintenance or call the cleaning people and say, come clean it, like I just went and cleaned it.
Really?
I'm not going to have someone clean that. That's not fair to them.
Yeah.
And so that was a 10 or $100 kind of task. But I'm like, I'm going to get out of my ivory tower that everybody thought that maybe I was sitting in, and I'm going to go, do this and take care of it. Right?
Was this when you were when you were a vice president or maybe?
No, this is when I was a director of
Okay,
HR.
got you.
Americas for a company that was international.
Gotcha.
And I'll never forget, like I wore gloves and I had a mask on, blah, blah, blah. But I actually took like the glove off and something got in my finger and it got infected. So like, that's probably the only time I really gotten angry at work. Because like we would do like employee, like town hall meetings every month and talk about status of the business and where are we going. And so that's another differentiator. I think as you grow in the HR ladder, like I would help lead those meetings and put together the slide deck and the presentations and talk to all the employees and the team members. I remember going to one of the town hall meetings. This was like right after it happened. I had like my finger was wrapped, bandages and gauze, and I was on an antibiotic. And I told people like, I don't know who did this, but like, you better own up to it. Cause like, I don't want to ever do this again. Like you can come talk to me privately, but like, let's be a man about it. And let's confess what we did wrong. Right. And if you're that unhappy, let's talk to me about what you want to do to leave the company. Like I was so angry. And so, my boss,
someone ended up fessing up to it out of curiosity?
no one did. No one did. And my boss, Kevin, he was the president of the company. He's like, Scott, he goes, just go home for the day. Cause he knew I was pretty upset, so, but again, I think that goes back to, again, like the servant leadership, like again, like meeting people where they're at. Number one, not everybody's going to be all sunshine and rainbows every day at the workplace. Right. And we come in, we tell our employees and team members, come into work and don't bring your personal life into work. Yep. Guess what? We're all humans, right? Yep. So we all have issues. Like, again, we talked about some struggles that you've had and I've had. I'm sure other people have had struggles. But when we treat people the right way and we show them care and empathy and we want to, talk to them like a human being and not talk down to them, we work with them to find solutions and we collaborate. That's when people want to come to work. Right? They feel like you said, you're at work more than you are at home, right? So this should be like maybe not like a family, because families fight and they get in arguments and all that stuff, but like a family feel where they feel comfortable coming into work. And if there's an issue or problem, they're going to speak up versus keeping it inside. Yep. And so like by doing what I did in the corporate environment with cleaning up the mess, literally, what happens is like when I would go on the shop floor, people would be like, oh, like Scott, like, how are you doing? Or if I needed somebody to work a little bit extra because we were behind on production, I'd go up to like, an employer or a team member, like, hey, Greg, can you help me out with this? 9 times out of 10, they're going to do it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. So it seems like you're definitely changing the culture with kind of the approach that you've taken. So I guess in 2019, it seems like maybe, well, at least with the, the vice president of the private equity, vice president of HR of the private equity firm, you maybe did you just kind of decide to do something different at that point? Or I guess like, okay, I want to do something else. So I what was that? I guess what was that time period in terms of the thought process of kind of maybe not being a vice president of the private equity firm anymore?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was working, I've always worked way too many hours, David, probably like yourself. I probably in the corporate world, I probably would work 80 to 100-hour work weeks, right? And that was pretty standard. Yep. I traveled a lot, which I didn't mind the travel, but I was going to like, at the time of the PE firm, I was in Florida, I was in Nevada, Canada, and then we had some locations in Ohio. And so I would travel to the locations. And then like we had a tornado that hit one of the facilities, like, or near the facility, like a quarter mile. And I remember being in a meeting and no one really kind of cared. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, I don't want to work in this environment.
Yeah.
It was more about the production and the bottom line. And so this is where I met, Tim is my neighbor, Tim Bratz in Cleveland, Ohio. And Tim asked me to come help him with his business in November of 2018. Gotcha. And Tim's like, hey, can you help me put in like some structure? So I started doing like what I do now with consulting clients is we'll put in like core values and what's your mission or your value statement. And we help them identify, areas of risk from an HR standpoint, help them develop performance management systems. I interview all their team members and give them like a pulse of what's going on in the business and help create their job description so people know their roles and responsibilities. And then we create goals for how they're going to grow when we develop their org structure. So like Tim got me to do that. And then after that, Tim's like, Scott, you just need to quit your job. And
Oh, so
so
you were doing that while you were still
I only did that with Tim. I did that
yeah.
I took 2 days off during the Thanksgiving holiday in November
Oh, gotcha.
2018. And Tim's like, can you help me? I'm like, sure, not a problem.
Yeah.
And then from that, Tim's like, you just need to quit your job. Like you can offer and help so many more people. And so then it became like, is that something I want to do? And so
Right.
my wife and I, we prayed about it. We talked about it. Tim being the authentic guy that Tim is, Tim's like,
Mhm.
"Hey, if you can't pay your bills, I'll help you pay your bills." I'm like,
Gotcha.
"Oh, okay." So I decided I was going to quit my job. That was in April of 2019, the day after Easter. And then I gave them a 2-month notice period because I had a contract. And
Yeah.
so I, live up to that. Plus I wanted to make sure that the company was in a good,
Yeah.
place.
That's that's
I left doing, like, I led diversity and harassment training in the workplace. I went to all the locations and trained everybody on that. And then I made sure I helped with my succession plan and who was going to do what. And then we started Fortitude HR Solutions June 24th of 19. But it was really because of prayer and because of Tim and my wife saying, like, why not do this for yourself? Right.
right. No, and that's interesting because as I was thinking about your story and just kind of, kind of just researching, and I saw that obviously I knew that you were a vice president of the AC company. Uh, and again, I would imagine that's a big corporation to head up the vice president of HR. I always wondered, how did you kind of go from there to okay starting your own company, and that's interesting. That kind of maybe Tim was maybe facilitated that more or less because again, like you said, I would imagine that a vice president of any company, man, you're getting a decent amount of money, and to say, hey, I'm gonna start this thing from scratch.
Yeah.
You,
Dave and I went from this to this overnight,
No, yeah, for sure. And it seems like unless it's like a catastrophic event that no, I understand, again, life happens and
Mhm.
you have catastrophic events that will, create that situation, but to just voluntarily do that, it seems like that's not necessarily what somebody would like naturally do.
Mhm. And I walked away from, not only from the large salary, but I also walked away from like a 50% bonus opportunity, like a 7-figure stock payout when one of the companies sold. But you know what? Like, I,
Really?
yeah, because of all of some of the adversity I went through in my life, I don't always, like, I'm not always the most confident person, right? And
Yeah.
so I don't believe always in me, right? And Tim and my wife looked at me and they're like, Scott, if you don't believe in yourself, who believes in you?
Right.
Right. And so, like, I'm like, well, I think I can do this. Like, I feel good about it. I can make a difference. I can help people, and I can work with smaller business owners that are going to really want to like engage and be a part of the process to make their company into something amazing.
For sure.
And so, like, that gave me, I think, enough of the confidence and the fortitude, to essentially walk away from all the success I had in the corporate world and start my own company. Right.
Got
And
you.
so
Got you.
I've
Well,
had,
go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, and I've had the support of my wife since day one. She was a photographer. She quit her job. They closed her business down in order to help me and support the business.
No, and I think this is a good question I have to interject, based on you saying that, because again, we're talking about investing, whether it's, in yourself or, to acquire skills and things like that and, investing in assets. But I think, your spouses, and a lot of people don't look at it this way, whether it's, your woman or a man, that's one of your biggest investments that you're going to make in life. And it seems like just throughout the process, I tell you what, it's not too many spouses to say, hey, we're going to go from here to here, and you're going to lose this big salary, and hey, I'm going to sign up and say I'll quit my job to help you out. I don't think it's too many spouses that are going to do that. So I guess, can you talk a little bit about like just investing in your spouse and even some key qualities and traits that help you identify based on kind of you being a go person, to help you identify somebody who's kind of going to be a good yin or yang or a good balance for you and really support you in a way that you needed to kind of be able to kind of do what you like, what your purpose is, because it seems like that's far and few in between these days.
Absolutely. Especially in today's world that we
Yeah.
live in, for sure,
Yeah.
David. I think number one for me, like, I met my wife's from Seattle, Washington
Okay.
area. It's actually Olympia, Washington, but most people don't know where that's at. So I say Seattle. And I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and we met in Arizona. So when I left the church because of, I was suicidal and all these issues, I didn't go. So when I went back, the pastor's like, I want you to get involved in youth ministry. He's like, I think you could help a ton of people.
Yeah.
So through my faith, I went to Arizona, to Mesa, Arizona. My wife and her youth group she went to Arizona. It was a conference for adults that were leading the youth.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting at the pool, and this lady, Jen, comes up to me that I had met, who was from Hudson, Ohio, like 25, 30 minutes away from where I live.
Yeah.
She's like, you got to meet Laura. And so I met my wife in Arizona at the pool, at a youth ministry conference for adult
Yeah.
leaders, and never thought I'd date, let alone marry somebody from Washington State.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it was funny at the time, like I liked 3 or 4 other girls, and I told my wife this, and she's like, "Well, you should go this one. You should call this one." And like I was very transparent. Like I'm the farthest thing from a player.
Yeah.
I was always like telling everybody like what I was feeling, and at the end of the day, like my wife, she ended up coming to visit from Washington in December of 2004. I'll never forget it. We're like our youth group, these adult core leaders. We were going up to Niagara Falls to go spend like the weekend. We had a bad snowstorm, so we canceled that, but she still came. And I remember, and this is way more than you wanted to know, David.
No, no, I mean, this is good. This is good.
We're at Dave and Buster's. And so the trip to Niagara Falls gets canceled because of the weather. There's like 30 people at Dave and Buster's. There's 3 tables of 10. And there's me, and then there's Laura, and then there's this girl, Megan, and then this girl, Tina, and this girl, Mary Beth, right? So there's all these girls that I kind of liked, right? We're at this table. Most awkward day of my life, right? By far, as far as like with the opposite sex. And so my buddy Steve, who I call Scuba pulls me aside. And he's like, Scott, he goes, like, these other 3 girls, you don't know Laura. Like, go spend time with Laura.
Yeah.
And so it's a long-winded question, but like, and then like we dated long distance, and then after like 6 months, I proposed to her, right?
Really?
And I flew out there. And so like she moved over to Cleveland, Ohio to be with me, and she gave up everything. Like her entire family is in Washington. She moved here to be with me. And so I think she had dated people like long-term in her life, for a year or two. I've dated people, in my life a couple times, like year, 2 years.
Yep.
I actually had a wedding engagement ring that I was going to give to one of the girls. And I knew what I wanted in life and in a partner. Right. And so did she. And so like, because like our faith is at our firm like center of our relationship. So I think that's what kind of helps us out. And we know each other's strengths and areas of improvement. Like I'm very much go. She's a little bit more of an introvert.
Gotcha.
And so we complement each other very well.
Sure. That's
and so and she's always been very supportive, and she knows like one of her big things. And like we asked a lot of the tough questions, like, if we get married, like, do you want kids? And if you do have kids, like, do you want to be a working person, or do you want to be a stay-at-home person? My wife's always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, right?
Gotcha.
So there was struggles when we were first married because I wasn't making the money that I was making towards the end as a VP, that she had to work still, right? And then when I got the job as a director of HR in 2011, she was able to quit and be a full-time mom.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
And our son was 5 years old at the time. And she's always been supportive because she knew that in order to be able to have her stay home and to provide the life that her and I both didn't have growing up,
Right.
I was going to take sacrifice.
Gotcha.
But, and then, it came at a cost. I mean, there was days, I'm sure, David, I'm sure you can appreciate this, where I'm working, 10, 12-hour days. I come home, I'll eat dinner with the family, and then I'll go back to work, until 2 in the morning. And so like, I wasn't always present, and I missed a lot of, because I did a lot of travel. So I could go to like London, or I'd go to Germany or Brazil or Mexico quite often, or New York, or to, Detroit, Troy, Michigan area. I wasn't always present. So the quality time mattered more than the quantity time.
So would you say like just being supportive was a big factor early on? That because again, like you said, you were around those other people, and a buddy says, hey, go spend some time with her. And again, she's from Washington State, so it's one thing to have a lot of like physical interactions with someone and just being able to just kind of better understand them. But it seems like you guys move pretty quickly, and maybe it wasn't as much kind of physical time with each other. So early on, was it maybe the supportive? Like what tilted the scale to the point where it's like, man, I think this is a person for me. Was it the supportive nature, or was it something else? Again, especially in light of you kind of dating or maybe having a thing for these other girls as well at that time.
Yeah, so definitely the support. I think the other thing is just like we knew what each other wanted, right? So we had open, clear communication. We also put the time in. Like, I mean, think of this. So Washington's 3 hours behind where we're at, because you and I are both in Eastern Standard Time, Pacific Standard Time. And so like we would talk every night on the phone. And this is before we even started dating, right? Or decide we were going to get married. So like just as friends, we would talk every night for like 2 hours on the phone.
Gotcha.
Like I go out with my buddies or go do like youth group stuff or work out. Then
Yeah.
I come home and like from like, 10 to midnight or, sometimes till 2 in the morning, I would just talk to her and find out about her day and what was going on. So like we knew a lot about each other before we even got to that stage where we were going
Gotcha.
to date each other. So
Okay.
there was like a friendship first.
Yeah.
And again, I knew like she was a faithful person. So was I. Like we both wanted that. And then we talked about like, we prayed for like our spouses. Like if we were going to get married, what do we want in a spouse? And so we already knew those things. I'm not saying that we didn't have issues or struggles,
Yes. No. Yeah,
but like that time that you put into it, like I'm a big believer in what you put into, kind of you get out, right?
gotcha.
And so putting that time and effort, just like you, like being on the football team
Yep.
and like working out, like if you don't work out, I mean, you may be God-given, athletically gifted. I am not. I would probably do 10 times the work to be maybe at the level that you're at. But again, it's the same thing with like the relationships that we have, right?
Sure.
So like I'm guilty of this now. Like even with like the fact that my wife and I own Fortitude HR Solutions together, we work together, and it's amazing. She doesn't want to kill me a lot of days, because I'm like go go go, and she's like no 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 no, like hold on here. And she acts as our CFO, and she does a lot of the behind the scenes things, and I'm more client facing.
Yep.
So, but like we're able to work together because we communicate and we talk, and so if there's an issue or a problem, like we'll resolve it typically.
Yeah.
And like I have this thing, I don't go to bed angry. Like my
I
grandmother,
like that.
passed away. Like I was angry at her. I never got to tell her that I was sorry and that I loved her. And that's eaten at me since 2002.
Wow.
So I will not go to bed angry. It's just something that's not in me. And so I think with all those things, like again, the support, the prayer, the faith, and I think knowing what each other's, expectations were. Like I already dated girls for a year and 2 years. I already had an engagement ring for somebody.
Yeah.
Like I knew what I wanted and what I didn't.
Right.
Right?
Well,
So
yeah.
just being transparent and honest and communicative, I think those things help, us be successful in our marriage. We'll be married in June 24th. It will be 17 years.
That's to be applauded. That's especially
Yeah.
these days. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. So man, congratulations on that. And hey, look, I'm asking that as a general question, but also like for myself as I'm kind of out here and just trying to figure this thing out, navigate that scene. It's important to because like I think we're kind of you and I are wired the same way as far as go, just very like just work and just
What
being
it is.
disciplined and things like that. To be able to find someone who kind of compliments you in that way to the point where you guys can feed off each other, have this synergy about you that kind of like heightens
Mhm.
kind of life together and kind of have success at what you guys are doing or what you're doing from a business standpoint. I mean, I don't know. I think that's something that that question was very much for me as well as the audience. So I guess I do have another question for you. So can you talk about network? Because I know you talked a little bit about it early on in terms of the power of network. I always say your net worth is your network. I know we met in Tampa at a real estate event, and man, that was interesting in and of itself. It makes more sense now, kind of given you kind of talking about Tim Brott's. It was Tim Brott's real estate event, which man, it was phenomenal for me. I made a lot of money since then, just based off of the information that him and his team kind of poured into me, and just kind of joining their kind of mastermind group and being involved there, and just kind of this network of people who are continuously pouring into you and wants to see you win and willing to give information and kind of help you out in any way possible. And again, that was in 2020, so kind of the start of the pandemic. And can you talked about Tim, being a catalyst of you kind of quitting your job as a VP of HR and kind of getting into business for yourself, and him like, hey man, if you need help as you're going through this thing, I got your back. So can you talk about a little bit about like how important it is to network and making sure like you're building a solid network? Because I think that's a big part of life for me, just being building a strong team and people, quality people, high character who really have your back. Push come to shove, and kind of really being able to rely on just having a mutual benefit. Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, David, when you said your network, your net worth is your network, right? Like, so really surrounding yourself with good people that you identify with, like, hopefully, like I have my own like moral compass and what, guides me. Hopefully you have something similar.
Yep.
So you want to be around like like-minded people
Yep.
that are like that, because, sometimes they appear that way on the outside, but on the inside, they're a completely different person. So
Sure.
it's kind of like when you're dating, people, like you got to get to know the person. So, like you want to spend time with people that are doing big things for sure. But if they're doing things that are, maybe not the right way or doing things that don't align with your values or your moral compass or whatever, like that's something that you just got to make sure you're always thinking about. And so I think like networking, any way you can network. If you're in real estate, going to real estate meetup groups, joining a mastermind, follow David's podcast. Like David is just dropping value. And I think when you're networking with people, like always lead with value, like always be a giver, right? And so I think when you give, like David and I were talking about this before the show here, like you'll receive back, right? And so like now it comes in a fine line because I struggle with this. Like I'll give and give and give and give, and then I don't receive. And like I'm okay with that, but I know that sometimes I don't value my time, right? And what I do in my profession. And so like you got to be guarded a little bit, I think, with that.
Yeah.
But again, I think building the relationships is super critical. It's not just in business or I think it's just in life. Like again, having good people that are there for you. Like if you're having a bad day, like, oh, like Scott, like, well, what can I do for you? Like I'm struggling with this, or David, like just being there to be supportive. Or, like again, since I'm faith-filled, I'm not preaching, but if I'm, if you're having a tough day, like, hey, can you pray for me? I'm having a rough day today.
Right.
Or like, just being there. I got this question on this. Can you quickly help me? Maybe you got a resource, or maybe you can make an introduction for me. I think again, like getting involved and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. Like some of the stuff we talked about, David, like some people would never share this out.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
But like being real, being authentic, like this is one of the things I love about Tim. Not only is he a good friend of mine, but like, he doesn't drive like a Lamborghini. He drives a Jeep.
Yep.
Like what I mean, like he's true to his roots, where he grew up and what he stands for. And I think he surrounds himself with that. And like in the mastermind group that I'm in with him, that I help lead, Legacy Family, like he's all about like fitting into like what the culture is and the values, and again being a giver. And it's not about me, but it's about kind of the we mentality.
Right.
So like, again, you can network in many different ways. Again, the meetups, again, if you're not someone that's real comfortable still with going out because of all this nonsense that's going on in the world, like join Facebook groups or again, engage with people that David's talking to. I mean, the value that David's giving to you right now is amazing. And the fact that he's doing it, he's not charging you, like, listen to what David's talking about. Listen,
I appreciate that.
Not me. Don't listen to me. Listen to David. David's the real star here. I just appreciate the opportunity to talk with them. It's great to catch up. But again, like, your network definitely is your net worth for sure all day long.
No, for sure. And again, I want to be respectful of your time. So I guess I just kind of want to get off into Fortitude HR Solutions because I think, like I said at the beginning here, you've been able to not only have be a subject matter expert in the field of human resources, but also being able to practice that on the other side with Fortitude HR Solutions. So we got a little bit early on of how that came to be. What are some of the things that Fortified HR Solution does? And can you talk a little bit more in depth in terms of like the business and what you do and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So we have two different divisions of our company.
Yep.
We have the HR and business consulting side, which is very similar to what we did with like Tim's company before I quit my job and went there for the 2 days while I was on vacation. So we'll help clients identify like their values and their culture. And then we work with the team members. We interview them. We call this like a 2-day deep dive where we'll go in and then we meet all the team members. We interview them. Like, what do you love about the company? What don't you love? If you own the company, what would you change or do different? And I do that anonymously, and I provide like an executive summary of like the pulse of the organization to the client. And then again, we're helping set up structure. We're going over org chart, performance management, setting goals and expectations. We do a lot more, I would say, strategic consulting than like the tactical, like typical HR stuff, right? Where Johnny doesn't like Susie. Like, okay, like I don't really care. Like we're all adults. Like let's figure it out.
Right.
I can help with that, but I don't want to spend my time on that.
Yeah, no,
And we don't do payroll. We stay away from employee handbooks just because I work with clients throughout a lot of the states in the U.S. and every state's got different employment laws.
for sure.
So normally, like if you want a good tip, like you can go to the employeehandbookstore.com. I don't get affiliate fees. I don't believe in affiliate marketing personally, but like for $39.99, you can download a template of a handbook for that specific state.
Gotcha.
And then I always tell clients like, go through it and then have an employment attorney review it, spend the money and invest it, make sure it's legal, and then you can release it to your team, right?
Gotcha.
So like I'll give people solutions, but I won't take on that type of work. And then we do a lot of like executive coaching. We do a lot of just like accountability stuff. And then we do a lot of stuff with trainings and leadership,
Okay.
different topics in leadership. The other side of our business, we do full service recruiting of W-2 team members all across the U.S. So, we try to stay mostly on the salary level roles,
Yeah.
and we do more of like, I would say, executive recruiting. But, like for some clients, like I'll help hire like an office admin, so we can do that. But we do stuff on the higher level, like, executive team, COO, CEO,
Gotcha.
like, manager, director level, salespeople, those kind of things. And so on the consulting business, the way we structured it now, David, like there's 6 team members, a part of Fortitude HR Solutions currently. I lead all the consulting and the business, like HR stuff. And then the recruiting stuff, I have a recruiting and sales manager named Dennis, and he leads that function, separate recruiting team.
Well, and I guess I want to ask this: is it if you think of HR, is it a certain point within your business? Because again, a lot of people talk about, hey, we're going to be, maybe coming across a recession or whatever the case may be, and it seems like, when you're talking about recessions, it seems like it's an inverse relationship between recessions and the amount of entrepreneurs that you start to have, where people are creating their own businesses. So I think this is definitely relevant. What I'm about to ask is it a time in your business where you should wait until you focus on HR, or should that be something that you're thinking about and that you're planning for at the very beginning, at the very inception of your business? Because a lot of times, or at least I used to think that, hey, when my business is making X amount of money, or when I have X amount of employees, then I'll start to kind of take HR more serious, or try to figure things out from an HR perspective. But is that the right way to look at this thing, or should I be looking at it at the very beginning to kind of really kind of maximize what I'm doing from a business standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to hear my answer. I'm probably biased in this answer, David, but I mean, I would do it from the beginning, right?
Okay.
Like setting the right foundation, like the values, the structure, job descriptions, understanding like documentation of like your key performance indicators, your KPIs, your SOPs, or having your organizational chart, and then having like how you're going to communicate with the team. What does that look like? Having all that stuff, to me, that's like part of your business foundation. If you don't have that at the start, I think your house crumbles, or your apartment building, or your self-storage, facility, it's going to crumble. So really like dialing that in, because if you know what your values are and what you stand for as an organization, what your why is, when you start going to hire your first team member, you're going to be able to talk about that, and people are going to be attracted to that, right?
That makes sense.
Don't have that information up front, it's hard to attract the right people, right? And so this is why, like, I think people struggle with recruiting top talent, is because they're probably like me a little bit. They keep things close to the vest. I told you before we started the show, like we just hired a marketing firm, and we're going to blow up social media, because like I'm not like look at me person, but I also know I'm not helping people if I'm not sharing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
I think, again, like if you're going to make your first hire, this is company ABC. This is what we stand for. This is what we're all about. We're growing. We're going to add somebody to the team. If you're interested in learning more, like hit me up, send me a DM, send me a message. Like I'd love to talk with you. Right. And so then even if you're not ready to hire your first team member, you have people in the pipeline, right, that might be interested in working with you. And then once you know what your first hire is going to be, normally people ask me like, what's your first hire? In my opinion, it should be like an executive assistant or office assistant, somebody to kind of help you, with the admin tasks. Because again, like you, David, as the business owner, I don't want you focusing on $10 items, right?
Right. Yeah.
You could hire, even if it's a virtual professional or virtual assistant, like Jeff Henry, one of the guys that's in my mastermind group, he's got a great company called Investor VAs, and Jeff's down in Tampa. But like you could hire a VA for like $8 to $10 an hour, right?
Yep.
They're still part of the team. You better treat them as part of the team. Don't treat them just as a VA.
Yep.
Treat them as part of the team. They're an equal contributing member of your team.
Yep.
With that, like you could take some of those lower level tasks off of your plate, and then you can focus on the higher revenue generating tasks, right? And that's going to allow you to make more money. This brings it all full circle, David. Right? Allows you to make more money, and then you can invest in yourself and go into masterminds. You can invest in like real estate deals. You can be a passive investor. If you got $100,000 you want to put into a syndication, and then you're getting 8% preferred return on your investment, but you don't have to do anything. Your money's working for you.
Yep.
So there's ways to do it. So like this is where I get real excited about like
I can tell.
Like build their business, because like this is like my wife and I, we're going to invest in our first real estate deal because of the ability that we've been able to do with saving money.
Right.
Yeah, and if you work a W-2 job and you got, 401k, you can use those funds. Like we worked with Amanda Holbrook at Specialized Trust Company.
Yep, I have a specialized trust account as well. Amanda, yep, I'm familiar with her.
Yeah, so we just rolled over a couple of my 401ks that I had from my W-2 jobs when I was working in the corporate world, and we're going to now deploy some of those resources to help like get some passive
That's yeah.
investment, right? So that's how you bring it full circle, right?
No, and that's important. And again, like I was telling you offline, a lot of this stuff, this is good for the audience. But as I'm going through things and learning and have a business and things like that, I'm learning for myself. So I think you're speaking to me because since the start of the year, talking to a buddy of mine, and I'm like, man, I need an executive assistant this year because I just have a lot of stuff going on and I need to be focused on revenue generating tasks.
Mhm.
And so I think kind of you confirming that to say, hey, one of the first hires is a VA or executive assistant, so that you can kind of get your stuff off, get your hands off of like the $10 issues or whatever the case may be, and kind of focus on more things that's going to bring in money to the company. And I think that you spoke to me directly with that statement. So no, that's good information. So I guess the last question I'll ask you is, again, aside from maybe the first hire, because I like to give kind of practical tips of people like the guests I'm coming on, and based on their expertise of what they're doing, I like to give practical tips for the audience, especially within that field of expertise of the guests that I'm interviewing at that point. If you're kind of running a business, or going to start a business, or kind of thinking about HR, what are some tips that the guests should be conscious of, or conscious of when they're kind of running their business or starting a business, or kind of just thinking about HR in general?
Yeah, those are
Really maximize kind of their situation, or optimize their situation, and kind of being able to make money and have an effective team, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one quick thing I want to go back to: be careful when we use job titles like executive assistant. Normally, like in the job market, people will say, "I want to make $70,000 as an executive assistant." And if you're just starting out and you don't have those financial resources in your operating budget, you may want to call it an office assistant. And then you hire someone at $15 to $20 an hour, and they're working hourly for you, maybe 20 hours a week to start, and then you eventually you move them into like a full-time role. So that's just something I wanted to clarify, because
Gotcha.
like the job title does, kind of dictate what the salary range people are going to be expecting and who might be applying for your role. So just FYI on that.
No, that's a good.
As far as like the business and getting started, like having a good business plan, I think people try to skip that step all the time, David. Like they want to just go jump in and do, and that's fine. But if we don't plan out like who's our avatar of our key customer client that we want to work with,
Yep.
What's our product offering, or what are we selling, and why should somebody work with us? Like knowing our competitive advantage, I think, is super important. And then bundling that with understanding like how much revenue do I want to make in the first month, 6 months, year, like kind of planning that out, forecasting it. And then do I have the financial resources in order to be able to fund my business? If I don't, like small business loans are out there. You might be able to work with the SBA, the Small Business Administration. You might be able to learn how to utilize and get like a line of credit. So having good relationships with like bankers, attorneys, like I think so many times people try to do all the financial things on their own, and that can really screw them up, because again, that's where like some of the details really matter, right? Like with your numbers and your bank accounts. So having good relationships with bankers or CPAs or accounting professionals. And again, they don't need to be full-time people on your team.
Right.
You could do fractional hiring of these people. Like that's what we do. We do a lot of that from like the HR consulting, business consulting side. We're a fractional like team member for them. Again, we're the way we work, we do things on like retainer, like an attorney does.
Yep.
So we're not your day-to-day point of contact, but you have like the boarded advisor, right? That you can use and pull in to your business. And I would say like mirror people that are already where you want to be in 5 years. Yep. Ask them questions, follow them on social media, maybe join a mastermind group. Like those things are going to propel you to what you want to do. There's a ton of free knowledge and content on podcasts, like what David's doing with Everyday Investor.
Yep.
You can so listen to those things, get involved, write down your questions, like network with people. Again, don't be afraid to ask, hey, do you have a couple minutes that you can talk? Most people are going to tell you, I don't have time to talk to you, because they don't want to give away anything for free. But if you find those people that will help you out and they care, like that's going to make a difference. And then I would say like just educating yourself, like listening to again, books or podcasts. Like Good to Great's a great book by Jim Collins. I like anything that Jim Rohn writes. The 12 Pillars was a great book that Tim Brodsky gave me back in 2019. Just talks about the different pillars in life, and that helps, I think, in business as well. So that was a good book. Anything that Simon Sinek writes, Start With Why, Leaders eat last. Like, just arm yourself, like what you said, invest in yourself and put the skills and the time and energy and effort into being the best version of you that you can be, right? And again, we're all going to have good days and bad days. And being an entrepreneur or business owner, like David and I have talked about, it's the up and down roller coaster. Some days, like, oh, like I'm doing great. This is a great day. And then other days, what did I just do? Right?
Absolutely. No, yeah. And that's good. And, I get excited about this stuff just because I'm learning. I'm still relatively young, and as I'm kind of going through life and kind of growing and kind of being in more of like, I don't want to say executive roles, but just kind of understanding things at on a deeper level. Well, I just learned about fractional CEO, and like you said, it's more of it would maybe pay you per hour, similar to like an attorney, and that can still be a way that you can get a lot of value to your company, so you can grow without having to necessarily pay a salary to an executive. You get executive level knowledge from a person without having to just pay a full salary. So that fractional CEO or COO or whatever, that's definitely something that I just recently found out about that appears to be very effective. So that was interesting that you threw that out there. But I think one of the cool things for me is, as I'm like interviewing different people, regardless of what field they're in, what industry they're in, you start to hear some of the same things. And I hope like the viewers and the audience really kind of picks up on this stuff. So, I interviewing TJ Duckett, who Michigan State, All-American, and, drafted first round by the Atlanta Falcons back in the early 2000s, played with Michael Vick, Warren Dunn down there. And he kind of talked about, just servicing others. You talk a lot about servicing and providing value to others to kind of really help you out in, your life in terms of whatever you're doing. I had interviewed this gentleman a couple days ago, and he's doing some big things west side of the state of Michigan, and he has a holding company. And I was asking him about, he invests in a lot of like startup companies, and I kind of was talking to him about like some advice or tips that you can give to startup companies. And it seems like a lot of the things that you just said, he mentioned. So knowing who your end user is, knowing what the competitive advantage that you bring, kind of knowing your expectations as far as how much money you're going to make, and contingencies based on you not making those things. So it seems like a lot of this stuff is important stuff, and it's kind of regurgitated, regardless of who the guest is. And I think I just hope the audience members picks up on that, because that stuff is important, especially when you're talking about starting a business. A lot of us, we kind of think of just going into a business and kind of building a plane as we fly it, which, I mean, that is a thing, and I do understand and respect that. But it's a lot of things that we can do on the front end to help us out when you're talking about having success, and kind of being more or less on a fast track of success, and just some things that we can control. I'm always about control the controllables. These are things as far as that you should think about and maybe should implement on the front end before you start a business, or when you start a business, that you can control, that you should really put in place to like I said, just help you out as you're like operating the business, and the business is growing, that you already have these things in place such that you're not trying to scramble at that point in time. So, man, this was good information. I think you dropped a lot of nuggets, and I hope that the audience member picks up on it. And again, this is not coming from somebody who hasn't man, you have seen a lot. You've been around the block a few times. You have faced adversity, and actually, I do want to talk about this. I know, we're running up on, almost an hour and 20 minutes, and
hopefully no one's sleeping, David. I've been talking a lot.
right. No, but again, I think this is a big part of it, because again, I said at the beginning when I was introducing you, as far as, you facing adversity, and I didn't kind of talk about this. And again, if you have to go, I understand that.
No,
but
I'm good.
again, when you're starting your business, again, you're going from a VP position to starting your business in 2019. Then all of a sudden in 2020, you had some health issues that, again, at the start of your business, now you have to kind of focus on your own health as opposed to trying to, provide service to others or provide value to others. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what went on in 2020 from a health standpoint, and how that had affected your newly formed business at that point, especially with having a family and having like real responsibilities that you had to take care of?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it was actually 2021.
Okay, 2012. Okay.
Yeah. So May 31st of 2021, I came down with COVID. And during that time, and we just had hired our first like W-2 team member.
Okay.
This is a good story. He was going to be our recruiting and sales manager. I get COVID, and then I'll never forget this. Like 2 weeks later, I feel much better. Like basically the doctors in the hospital said, good luck kind of thing. And I got pretty sick and fever was high, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was supposed to go to DC on June 14th to go work with a new client and like help them with one of those 2-day deep dives I was telling you about, David.
Yep.
And instead of going, Oliver's like, hey, let's just move it to a Zoom, session instead. So we did Zoom. It was June 16th of 2021. I'll never forget the date. Lower sharp back pain, can't see, go upstairs, supposed to do another Zoom at 2:00, get up there. My legs are, as wide as like a tree. They're black and blue. I can't feel my legs and think I'm having a stroke or I'm dying. Like something's not good.
Yeah.
So I call my wife and let's be honest, sometimes we can be a little bit dramatic.
Yeah.
Like what they call like the man flu or whatever.
Yeah.
So my wife, I call her, she's outside and she's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, yeah, like I can't walk. Like, I don't know what's going on. So ended up calling 911. Ambulance takes me out. My blood pressure is 65/44. They thought I was having a stroke. They did the stroke test. It wasn't a stroke. Couldn't figure out what was going on. So I go to the ER and they're doing all these tests. They're talking about maybe amputating my legs right there on the spot. They're like, where's the blood circulating? They couldn't figure out why the blood was still like going through my body because it was all retained like in the lower part of my body. And so did a bunch of tests. Long story short is I ended up having blood clots from my toes to like underneath my heart. And so I have a birth defect in my inferior vena cava, which like splits off into two.
Okay.
For that I had blood circulating. I didn't have a pulmonary embolism and I didn't die.
Wow.
I feel very grateful that God given me a second chance. I was in the ICU for 5 days. I had double COVID pneumonia.
Yep.
They asked if I was going to be like on a vent or if I was trached before this. I wasn't because I just didn't go to the doctor. And so through all that, I got onto there. I was thankful I could walk. I can still walk. I've got some like numbness in my right foot. That's, I've learned to live with it. It's not like I can't drive or I can't walk.
Right.
But it then has propelled a lot of other health issues, like with a resting heart rate, like in the 130s. And then like I would have a gout flare up attack, it seemed like every 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. My brother has gout real bad.
No good. And so I ended up, I went from like having this life scare and then like I wasn't taking care of myself. Like I got into this funk where again, I give all my all to work, but I didn't care about me personally.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting up to about 270 pounds and I'm only 5'8.5", 5'9" on a good day. Right. And so with that, like very unhealthy, not feeling good, always out of breath walking. And so like resting heart rate's atrocious. My wife looks at me and I'm like, all right, like I know I got to do something. Right. And so she started walking with me around our block and like, because if I walked to the end of the driveway, like my resting heart rate would be like 150.
Really?
So the cardiologist doesn't want my heart rate to be at 153. And so like we just started slowly walking. And then, so since May of 2022, I can say pretty closely to every day of my life since then, I've walked every day, like 3 to 4 to 4.5 miles now.
Nice.
Changed my eating habits. I've really kind of focused on eating clean and healthy.
Yep.
And really trying to be the best person that I can be, right? Because again, if I'm not the best version of me, I can't give it to my clients. I can't give it to my wife or my son or my family or the youth ministry kids that I've ministered to. So I've gone from 270 down to 183.3 as I sit with you today. I have 23.3 more pounds I want to lose, and then I want to start putting muscle on. But I just know that this is something I can't neglect in my life, right? My health needs to take priority because I want to be around for my son and for my family. And one of our close friends, their son and daughter, they just asked us to be their godparents, their kids. So like, I want to make sure that I'm a positive role model and influence to them. And if I'm doing one thing and saying something else, it's not the right reflection of who I want to be as a person.
Yeah.
So like, and that's tough. Like, so like during this whole thing, David, to go back to the point to tie it into business, my recruiting and sales manager saw me in the hospital. He's like, I can't work for you. Like, you may not make it. So he ended up leaving, and I'm not mad at him for it. Somebody that I was close with, and we really are not really close now, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, like we had to pause our business. We were doing pretty well in business right before this.
Okay.
We had to pause everything. Like I took 2 months to like really recuperate and get back into my feet. I stopped a lot of the recruiting stuff that I was doing, and I just focused on consulting. And then as I got a little bit healthier and stronger, we started doing more roles, and I brought on some other independent contractors to help us with recruiting. so I could still focus on the consulting. And then
Right.
I was going after our current recruiting sales manager for 3 years. I'm like, hey, Dennis, like, you got to come join. Like, we're going to build something great. Like, I want you to be a part of it. And I'd known the guy for 9 years. He didn't join till June of 2022.
What do you think tilted the scale out of curiosity?
For him, I think him and I have always had like a good professional relationship, and
Right.
he had some stuff going on at work, and he was seeing some of the stuff that we were doing, and there's just a lot of potential with what we do, right? I mean, so between that and, like, he also has an HR background, so he can even help with some of the HR consulting stuff that we do, and like we align well with like our values and what we want to do with our clients, and yeah, I mean, we're in business, we want to make money, but like I also want to help people, right? So
Right.
like, getting that, and then like I'm talking to you today from Northern Virginia, like I told you, and I'm working with clients that have become like really great friends of ours to my
Yep.
wife and I. And so we flew out yesterday, and we're talking about a new business venture that we're gonna start here soon, that focuses on businesses that want to grow and scale at a higher level. And we're talking about doing like a business like retreat.
Nice.
So like there's some really cool things that I'm really excited about, that it's not about me, but it's about what can I give to other people. And I'm gonna start using the second chance, or maybe if you count all those times where I was suicidal or had like guns in my mouth or was gonna jump off a building, maybe I've had 15 chances. But like I know that God's not done with me.
For
And
sure.
I remember being in the ICU. My wife, after I had surgery, there's a song, "Canvas in the Clay." It's a Christian song, and
Okay.
it's about like God's not done with you yet.
Gotcha.
And so I just know that I have more to give, and I'm trying to live each day by giving back and doing something to help other people. So that's
No,
what I do.
that's man.
Yeah.
That's amazing, and it seems like kind of more or less being on the other side of things. Business has picked back up and it's going, I would imagine better than ever. He's talking about other ventures that you're doing. About to do the first real estate deal to kind of create some passive income. It seems like since that time, it seems like you're hiring people with 42 HR solutions. So it seems like things have kind of picked back up since then.
Yeah, I'm extremely grateful and
Yep.
blessed, and just thankful. I think again, having the attitude of gratitude each day.
Yep.
Again, not expecting I get tomorrow, right? Living
Right.
like today's kind of my last day. And so when you've been through the near death experience and they tell you that, kind of shakes you at your core,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. For
And
sure.
so,
Put
yeah,
things in perspective. But
absolutely.
no, man. Again, I appreciate this, Scott. I think it was a lot of good things that we talked about. I think it was a lot of insightful things, informative things that I think the audience will definitely be able to take and apply, and hopefully have at least a fraction of the success that you have had over the years. Is it? I guess maybe two things. Where can people find you if they want to retain you for your services? Help you with recruiting, just kind of help the organization help their organization as a whole. How can people kind of find you, whether it's on social media or the two HR solutions? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can go to fortitudeHRsolutions.com. That's our
Okay.
website. I know it's a long name. You can find me on Facebook, Scott, Scott, Hanis, Hanis. Send me a DM and I'll make sure that we connect. Or, there's an email address and a contact us on the website. That's probably the best place to.
Okay. 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 Nice. And then I guess any last words? I know we have talked about a lot of stuff here today. Some heavy stuff, some more not as heavy stuff. Some business stuff. Is it any I guess last words that you want to leave us with as we kind of wrap up for today?
I think I would just tell you what I tell my son. Like, you are made for greatness. You're made for more. Don't settle. Like, find out what your passions are. Go after your dreams, and then put the work in. Like, I mean, nobody gave David anything. No one gave
Yep.
me anything.
Right.
If you want to be successful, you got to put the work in. There's no like magic formula or pill. That's why the health and wellness industry is like so crazy.
Yep.
So like, just be grateful for what you have. I think that those are things that are more personal, but I think they apply to every aspect of your life, business, relationships, etc.
I like that. I like that. And I think that's a good place to end it. All right, TEI family. Until next time, we're signing off. Take care.